action items. We have two members online, but they will obviously be able to listen in, but I cannot have them in and participating on action items till we have a quorum to allow them to come in and participate. Thank you, General Assembly. So we'll go ahead and call the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership to order for our Wednesday, June 28th, 2023 meeting. And I'd like to welcome everyone. And the first thing we're going to do, we have some new members to the partnership. And we have two here in person and one online. And Ian's going to walk us through who our new members are.
So Bree Keys here from Savannah County. Bree, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Bree. I'm one of the Savannah County Planning Commission. Filling the seat after my mom passed away in October, but I'm here ready to learn and ready to work.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We have Emily Dreyfus, who's serving as the interim director of the Public Housing Association of Residents. Emily, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Emily Dreyfus. I'm a law community organizer with the Legal Aid Justice Center, and I'm currently serving as the interim executive director for the law.
Good, welcome. And online,
We have Shannon Mead, who is at the Virginia Department of Health and works on the HOPWA program in our region. So Shannon, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Shannon Mead. I'm basically the HIV and harm reduction program manager. So I do oversee HOPWA, but I also oversee all of our community testing, our PrEP program, as well as Ryan White, as well as our harm reduction programs here at the health department.
Great, thanks, Shannon.
welcome, Shannon. And just by way of we can do quick introductions if I'll go around the room and everybody can let folks know who we are and what we do. They probably all know Ian at this point. I'm Ned Galloway. I am a member of the Elmore County Board of Supervisors and the current chair of this body.
My name is Keith Smith. I'm the vice chair and here from the Planning District Commission. That is my role.
Hi, I'm Ron Williams. I'm the chairman of the Green County Planning.
Very good.
I'm Anthony Hallway, the director for Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Office. I'm Kenny Allison.
Well, speaking of new members, Kenny is a new member. We were just letting everybody else know who we are, but would you mind introducing yourself, Mr. Allison?
Kenny Allison, the chair of the Virginia Works Piedmont, Virginia. What else to say? Besides, this is my third meeting, so I say, and look forward to being a whole lot of moving on my person as a person.
Welcome. We're glad to have you here. So we had Anthony Collette.
Good afternoon, Les Sheedy and the University of Virginia. Margaret Clear, I'm the Community Development Strategy.
Lloyd Snow, Charlottesville City Council. I'm pretending to be my own pain today.
Emily Dreyfus, Public Housing Association of Residents.
I'm Dan Rosenwein, I'm Deputy Manager for Charlottesville, and I'm the rest of the nonprofit.
And we'll go to fact, but
I'm Rick, TJ, Chief Operating Officer, Director of Housing.
Lori Chamberlain, I am a regional housing grants.
awesome. Thank you, everyone. And with the arrival of Mr. Allison and Mr. Snook, we have a quorum. So that will fall right into play. So the first order of business, if we have two members online who will have to take a vote to allow them to participate electronically. And first we'll have them state their name and where they are at. Mr. Greg, would you like to?
Let's see if I can talk. You don't want me in the room today. I have the flu. So I am home in my home study.
Thank you, sir. And Shannon?
Hi, I'm Shannon, Blue Ridge Health District.
And they're both in Charlottesville. Yeah, just note that for the record. And if someone would like to make a motion to allow them to participate electronically. Whoa. We had 4 firsts and 1 second. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No opposition, no abstentions. All right. They are in the meeting. Thank you. And we'll go to item number 2, comments from the public. Do we have anyone here in the room? Do not see anybody that's not a member. Do we have anyone online who wishes to give public comment? Right. We will move on from comments from the public and go to item number 3, our consent agenda. We have our March 24 draft minutes from the brief meeting we had after the our day what's the word escaping me? Summit. And we have our fiscal year 23 year-to-date profit and loss, which is a handout that was in the packet. Are there any corrections? Yes, ma'am.
I was not present that meeting.
Oh, okay.
Nor was I.
All right.
The minutes don't claim that I was present, but I will have to be abstaining from the approval of the minutes.
Any other corrections or edits?
I will abstain from voting as well.
And any questions about the profit and loss handout? Great. If there is a motion to approve the consent agenda. Who said that? Mr. Allison? And who made the second there? Who snuck the second in? I missed it.
I think
Margaret.
Margaret.
Yes.
That was loud. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
So we had 4. Got it. Thank you. And then we will go to number 4. We have action items. The first are bylaws. So we had a presentation or information in the handout. The executive committee did some bylaws work as part of our strategic plan. And what is in the packet, Ian will do a brief review of the things that we're updating or changing. And then we'll answer any questions and take the action.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to briefly go over some of the revisions that were put forward by the executive committee. And I want to also couch this with the understanding that the bylaws, this is not the last change to the bylaws that we anticipate over the next few months, as I'll get into later in this meeting, talking about now that we have this implementation grant and are under contract with a consultant, the bylaws are part of the work that the Virginia Housing Grant is conducting. So these are just changes that are primarily focused on officer time of service and also ensuring that there's not too much turnover as we start moving into potentially adding members to the partnership and changing the composition of the executive committee. So I'll just run through each of these individually and then we can if you have any questions, be happy to try to answer them. In Article 4, Section 5, we've changed the executive committee membership service amount of time from 2 years to annual, just to ensure that folks that are on the executive committee, it only meets 9 times a year, and we want to make sure that we're not sort of just throwing people in without. We want to at least preserve some sort of stability on that committee, and also. In addition to that, in Section 6, there's additional language indicating that every 2 years, the partnership will examine this executive committee to determine if new appointments are necessary. So if that is the case, no more than half the executive committee will be changed at one time. So again, we want to have some continuity of institutional knowledge within that body. And then finally, a pretty straightforward change to this section. Most of that paragraph of Section 14 was deleted to then just conform with a simple statement about the TJPDC's electronic participation policy. So essentially, there's an opportunity for the executive committee to identify some all virtual meetings for the calendar year. These are meetings that would not be held here at the Watershed Center, but only through Zoom, but they have to be identified at the beginning of the calendar year. And that's something that the TJPDC electronic participation guidelines designate. Next, in Article 5, talking about the officers of the executive committee and by virtue of the executive committee, the full partnership, again, serving for 2 years rather than 1 year. We want to make sure that folks are committed to participating in that role for an additional year, but also, again, we we think that it made more sense to have folks serve biannual years rather than annual years. And then finally, we're not looking to have, this extends to outside of just the executive committee, but no more than half of a committee. So some of the implementation committees for the strategic plan, we're not looking to have more than half of that membership be replaced or changed at one time. So a lot of this was focused on continuity and also preserving some institutional knowledge within each of these committees and within the partnership more broadly as the officers. But happy to field any questions on this, and I would love for folks on the executive committee also jump in if they remember some of the justifications for these changes on discussion.
Yes, I wanted to ask a little bit about the rationale and maybe the wisdom in Article 4, Section 6, about not being able to replace more than half of the executive committee. Could that put us in the fact that you guys sort of think through the math about that, think about the potential buying if there's turnover of the board, then we can be able to satisfy that provision within the bylaws. Did you guys have a conversation about that?
So you're saying if we have turnover on the partnership,
Yeah, let's say that the executive committee 7 people, if 4 people leave the partnership during that time, you won't be able to fulfill this obligation of the bylaws if you don't turn over more than half.
we did not discuss that. I'm not even sure my brain is wrapped around what you just said. If we have, so we don't want half of the executive committee to turn over. But you're saying that we could potentially get to 4 people and just generally in the partnership itself and coincidentally also be on the executive committee. Yeah, we did not discuss that.
In theory, all of them could, because everybody could turn over in 1 year, but the likelihood, how long could it exist?
4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I get what you're saying. I think the spirit is more change, maybe perhaps it should be worded more like changed by the partnership, as in we have there are 7 seats and the partnership designates 3 of those or 4. We don't want 4 of them to be changed at once so that the majority of the executive committee are now new to that committee, if that makes sense. You're talking more about if people just leave the partnership more generally or are no longer able to serve in those.
I guess in general, I'm not gonna belabor this, but I mean, I think in general, your bylaws are pretty ironclad. You want to follow the bylaws so you learn the law, and when you give yourself constraints and bylaws, you end up sometimes giving yourself constraints that you don't want, and then the only way to get around that is to change the bylaws, which is a lengthy process. To me, I mean, there are ways to write bylaws that say something like, you know, the intent is to not turn over a floor. Without firmly constraining yourself. Again, I'm not gonna.
Well, we could add that statement in. That's an easy statement to add. The intent here is to not have massive turnover on the body.
So instead of saying no more than half of the executive shall be replaced or otherwise changed, it's the intent to provide continuity by not changing them. And that way you're following unusual happens. I mean, worst case scenario, you get 7 really bad. And really, as a partnership, there's some rationale to turn them over. I think we probably wouldn't go over.
I like that. I think we can add that statement in. Did you get the gist of that?
Yeah.
I have a number of questions, and I confess that I don't think I had seen the bylaws until they were sent to me yesterday. So the first thing that strikes me is that it sort of feels like, I mean, there's a mention of an annual meeting shall be held at the time designated by executive committee. Usually the annual meeting is sometimes called an organizational meeting or whatever, would be like the first meeting of the year or something like that. That would be the time when officers would be chosen, when new members might be chosen, if that was going to happen, if the executive committee might be reconstituted or something like that. So I'm thinking, number one, that we ought to figure out, I mean, are we working roughly around a fiscal year kind of a basis? Are we looking at a calendar year kind of a basis? Would our first meeting of the calendar year be a good time to say we're gonna have this be the organizational meeting for the year? Or well, let's face it, if we're looking at the fiscal year, first meeting in July may not happen until September, given the way summers work around Charlottesville. It just seems to me that there ought to be some clarity there. I have a few other specific questions. The thing about term of office, last sentence, executive committee members are exempt from term limits. Is anybody subject to a term limit in this?
Something the same.
Or
other than the officers.
the original was the officers, because we've already changed that the first 4 years.
It sort of jumps out at me as saying, it causes me to say, okay, they're exempt from each subject.
Right.
Then, let's see. One of the other circumstances there might be a vacancy. I guess we would say that, let's say somebody, an elected official, resigns from the body from which they were selected, or to which they had been selected, that would also constitute a resignation, although it doesn't necessarily have to. I was wondering if we want to make clear that in some way that's for people to be, of course, this comes up primarily in the context of the executive committee, but that they would still need to qualify under the category that we have in mind. So I mean, these are just a few little kind of little things that being that guy, I come up with it.
You've just volunteered yourself for the bylaws committee.
That's fine. I end up on the bylaw committee about every time I'm on, so.
I think the annual meeting piece, the first one was at the formation of the body, if I remember. I don't ever remember having, like which meeting would be our annual meeting. The vote of the officers on the executive committee has kind of fallen to the timeline as the same timeline as the TJPDC, which typically gets that in place before the fiscal year starts. So the TJPDC voted at the beginning of their June meeting, for the current slate of officers. So it falls in line that their committees kind of follow the same structure as the main commission board. So I don't know that we've ever discussed formalizing that as the process, but that's what we've been doing. Around that May-June timeframe is when we've elected or said who the officers of the executive committee is going to be.
Yeah.
So you could say at the last meeting of the fiscal year to be selected to begin July 1.
Because then that would always allow us in this June meeting to have everything formalized before the start of the next year. So you're not doing what you said about a July, waiting till September kind of thing. Now, the other items we may have to go, and there's nothing, so the bylaw work that the executive committee completed was simply that we did not feel we had to consult that out, to send that out to the consultants. The consultants are looking at, do we have the right people at the table? Who's missing? Who should we include? Size of both the partnership and the executive committee. So there's nothing pressing about getting these bylaws changed today that we could incorporate these notes. I think Dan's note with the statement's a little easier to do than going back and ironing through these. So maybe
If somebody wants to send me a Word document, I'm happy to tweak it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
so we can delay or table this until the next full partnership meeting to incorporate those changes. Because I know for your electeds, it then should trigger a process that goes back to the naming committee and says you need to appoint a new member. And that may not be captured.
Right. That's just sort of assumed, but it's better to write it out.
Of course, our electeds are on a calendar year.
Right.
So if that matters.
Yeah, okay.
I think the concern about like I'm leaving BRAC in September, but I'm specifically filling a particular role. So I feel like that is the concern. If I understand it correctly.
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether we would sort of automatically assume that your successor would take that spot. I happen, there's one board in town that we're currently having a fuss with, where they say, hey, you appointed this person, he happened to be in the particular role at the time, And no, we're not gonna let you appoint the new person in that role, we're sticking with the same person, even though that person is no longer in government. That doesn't make any sense, but that's where we are, and I think you want to get off that situation.
Yeah.
I would not have thought it necessary to get off that situation until just then.
Yeah.
It seems to me because they're specifically listed as officials or representatives. That should be the concern, but it is really, I hadn't thought of that either, but. I don't know, does that satisfy your concern?
That's one of the concerns that would be satisfied. I'm also curious, when we think about voting members, is there a process? I guess all of these folks are. It's designated who appoints them.
Yes.
So okay, that's fine. The other minor point under qualifications, if we're electing 7 executive committee members and we've listed 7 particular kinds of people, I would just say instead shall include, shall consist of. But the question that this gets to is who selects which elected official? And actually an interesting point that the term elected official probably isn't what we want anyway, because under our list of voting members, the city of Charlottesville appointment could be the planning commission.
Right.
The membership for the partnership membership by design was that the jurisdictions would have 2 appointees, one of which must be an elected. So that was the reason the elected's probably named in there is to satisfy that. The partnership did not want the board, but no offense, did not want them just appointing a staff member and like a planning commissioner. They wanted an elected serving on the body. And an alternate. If the elected can attend. So like Diantha McKeel is my alternate. She happens to be representing the transit as the transit partnership's appointee to the partnership. But since she's already coming to the meetings, she was like, oh, I can be the alternate if Ned can't be there.
Yeah. But she cannot for voting, but she's the.
Yeah.
For moral purposes.
Yeah. For Diantha, she gets 2 counts. No, I mean, it would just be 1.
Is there anything other than the bylaws that says what the expectation is for appointment from the city of Charlottesville? There's some foundational document that's there what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the bylaws, there's the framework, an operational framework, which is a little less, it's not a set of rules, it's rather describing the partnership.
The intent.
Yeah, the intent.
Constitution.
Correct, yeah, right. And so I think I would have to review it, but I think in that document, the idea is what kind of Ned was describing, where you want to make sure that there are elected officials involved in the process. But again, I think that all of this is good discussion because it will, like Ned was saying, this is something that is going to continue to be part of the work the consultant is going to do, or the beginning of their work. So
what I would, yes, sir.
So while we're still talking through this, one thing that's always been a little baffling to me is because we seem to struggle with achieving a quorum for these meetings. The only thing I see in the bylaws is under forum for meetings is about the executive committee and not the partnership members. So this one says a majority of the executive committee, which would be 4, right?
For the executive committee meetings, yes.
But this doesn't seem, well, so the question then is, where in this does it speak to voting members of the partnership meetings like we're having today? And what's required of the form?
Yeah, maybe if
And I think, I heard you make a sort of a reference when we were counting noses was, thank you, General Assembly. So I assume that's something that's specified by General Assembly.
they should let us meet without all these damn rules. We did it for COVID for 2 years. We notified it. There wasn't an issue of notice. People participated. We had more participation. But now that that's over, Let's pull it back. So I've been shouted down at my own board a few times about my liberal view of electronic meetings. And Tommy Barlow, who would have thought Mr. Barlow from Louisa and I are on the same page. So the quorum must be physically present. And it's usually your majority plus your half plus one gets you to the quorum. So I'm sure it may not have actually been spelled out, but everybody just assumes you need, whoever your partnership is, you need half plus one to be quorum.
Well, so there at least one other buy-in on where the partnership, where a quorum consists of one representative from the city, one representative, transit partnership, I guess, one representative from the city, one representative from the county, you know, and so on. Doesn't matter how many other 14 people may be there, as long as we've got a quorum, a majority, or not long, as long as we've got at least one person from every jurisdiction, or a majority of the jurisdiction represented, something like that. And I've never been clear where that rule came from either.
MPO, you're thinking of the MPO. I think.
My suggestion would be, as the consultants look at this, that you examine quorum, and I know that, I'm not sure that it's the best use of Ian's time to have to call everybody the day before and badger people to get here. Establish a big body. And some of the votes are pro forma votes. If we could establish a smaller threshold for a quorum, that might be worth it.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Well, the consultants won't be doing that work. That'll be the executive committee tasked with that. So we've already defined what the consultants will be doing relative to the strategic plan. So we're happy to take this back and figure this out as well. I mean, I remember the creation of the first set of bylaws. It was, I think at the time it was Chip and Keith. And I mean, we found a boilerplate template and then said, all right, let's start here and let's start to craft it. That they had found that they'd used for some other TJPDC commissions. So this is our first real review of them since we put those into play. So
It's time for the bylaws to match what we're actually doing. So,
yeah.
And we either change what we're doing or we can change the bylaws. It's easier to change the bylaws.
well, if it makes sense, yeah.
spoken like a true chair of a bylaws committee. Well done.
Somebody wants to shoot me, I'll say, shoot me a Word copy.
Yeah, I can do that.
And give me a Word copy of the framework or any other organizational documents. And I'm happy to spend a few hours.
Sweet. Great. We'll do that. And then the next meeting will be September. So we'll just take a note it to see if we're there by then or not. There's nothing magic about getting this done. We want to do them so they're not getting in our way. Any other comments? Thank you, Ron. All right. No action needed. Item B under number 4, chair, vice chair appointment. The recommendation from the executive committee is to appoint myself, Ned, as the chair for the coming year, and Keith as the vice chair, which would be the current, who's in the current positions. Any questions or commentary there? Now's your time to unseat us. We have a quorum present.
My wife would suggest that.
If there is no objection, we'll need a motion to make that appointment.
Second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed, any abstentions? All right, that is approved. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
This has become, I don't know for Keith, I mean, I'm not going to speak for Keith, but this has become the kind of the prioritized committee outside of the main body that I'm serving. So I appreciate the willingness to allow us to continue to be in the leadership roles. The next item, number 5, new business. So we'll have an update on the Albemarle County Developer Incentives Work Session, which is coming in July. And I'll invite Keith to have some input here as well, so that everyone knows the the request was made of Albemarle County for this, for the Regional Housing Partnership to take on a work session around developer incentives. Since it's coming from the board on which I am a member of, other than setting up some of the framework and the rationale, the actual execution of the day, I'll be pulling back and be more of a participant. Whereas staff and Keith are going to be taking more of the kind of facilitator leadership roles on it. But I know that there's updates on who's participating, the day, the structure of the day and all of that. So Ian, I'll let you and Keith take it over from there.
Yeah, sure. I'll speak briefly and then shoot over to Keith. So yeah, this event will be happening at the North Fork Research Park Town Center 4, I believe. If you were at the strategic planning session, it's that same room. And Keith will be moderating. What we did was over the last few weeks, we solicited input from the partnership members about who we should invite. So selected developers, nonprofit developers. So we tried to cast as wide a net as possible. And as of right now, we have about 21 confirmed participants, including regional housing partnership members who wanted to attend, as well as nonprofit and for-profit developers. And so what we're in the process of doing now is kind of putting together the agenda for the event. So not only sharing the Housing Albemarle plan with the invited attendees, but also sending a brief survey out to get basically their top 3 developer incentives. I know that basically that raw material will be put into an agenda packet that will guide discussion, as well as be able to produce some material like case studies or clarification information that would help folks to be prepared, though I imagine most of the participants are going to be intimately aware of all of the, at least most of the types of incentives that we'll be discussing. And then, yeah, so we'll kind of work through each item one by one in a pretty informal roundtable manner. Afterwards, we will be producing a memo that will be sent to the Albemarle board, kind of summarizing the input and summarizing the discussion. And there will also be coffee and snacks in between 2 1.5-hour sessions. So that's kind of the skeleton where we are right now. But it's 2 weeks from today, so it's coming up. And again, if you're interested in participating or attending, please let me know because I need to account for all the folks that will be there. But Keith, you want to go ahead?
No, first and foremost, I'm honored that you've been asking me to do this. I hope I don't screw it up. But the survey that got sent out, did that go out to everybody?
Yeah.
Here?
Yes.
So please fill it out. It's 3 simple questions. Keep it pretty simple on your 3 top choices. If there's more, add more to it. I had a conversation with Valerie Long yesterday, and she's sending it out to multiple other developers to respond on it. The driver of those 3 responses or more is going to dictate the pace and the tone and the tenor of the meeting. So please do that. Please fill it out. You don't have to go into long war and pieces on it. Just a couple of high bullet points on what you see as your top 3, 4, or 6. I believe there's space to add more, correct? Yeah, to add more into it. But that would be super important to formulate the process. It's going to be pretty much correct. Jump in if I misspeak here, Ian. It's going to be broken kind of into 2 halves. The first half is going to be more on the rental side of it, right? The second half will be more on the ownership side of it. There's going to be your stock going up? Is that what it is?
I wish.
Or it's going down? Is that what that one was? The networking component between the 2, we feel is super important. And that's something we learned from the last summit that we did, that was a lot of engagement between the 2. So we'll have the first one, we'll have a little bit of a networking opportunity in between. We'll go into the second, but our goal is just to try to create a very simple outline to present to the board, Albemarle County's Board of Supervisors. Happy to answer any questions on that. Did I do a good job?
Yeah, we're excited to be a venue for this type of discussion. I mean, we hope that other localities, organizations kind of follow, I mean, if it goes well, follow in this type of events footsteps, because we feel like it makes sense for this body to kind of host these types of conversation. So
Thank you for adding that, Ian. So for the way this process is going to be, there's going to be a roundtable with 20-something folks, and then the rest is going to be open to public. I know Michael Payne wants to come because he wants to see how this is going, maybe something that might be implemented into Charlottesville. I'm encouraging the Fluvanna County Board of Supervisors to show up. Anybody else in the field or that's involved in housing affordability to show up, to go ahead and see if there's something they can learn as this body, maybe Fluvanna County, and I hate to pick on Fluvanna, but since we're two Fluvanna folks, will do that. Maybe Fluvanna County might want to do something similar and invite us to help moderate that process. Thank you. Any questions?
Will there be a public comment section as well?
I think so, yeah, probably at the beginning.
It's a public meeting.
Yeah.
So we will have it'll be run like a regular public meeting. We will have comments, probably two. We'll see how everything comes up a little bit in the beginning, at the end, but we do want to give opportunity for the public to comment on it as we're moving through it.
The spirit of the structure is kind of behind how Albemarle County School Board does their work sessions, where they literally will put their board members around not just staff, but stakeholders, community members, depending on the topic. There's always a public comment section at the beginning, which can be general, but then they take it at the end because then people have a chance to react to what they heard in the work session. In between, a lot of times those get large enough that they have to switch around. So you'll maybe have two board members go and then two go to do this question. And both in past partnership meetings and in that session, those transition periods allows for that networking to happen, so that the people that aren't around the table who are participating in the meeting have not just the chance to put input in the official 3 minutes that they get, but an interaction with the people that are at the table. So a lot of times, when you're walking from one room to another, what's being said can find its way into the next session. So we said, well, let's formalize the networking so that those folks around the table can get at the people that are at the table. And then that can immediately get part of the conversation and not just be in public comment.
So I see probably 4 public comments: beginning of session 1, end of session 1, beginning of session 2, end of session 2. And I'll probably make a judgment call on, if there's a half a dozen people in the room, that's one thing. If there's 200, we might have to tone that down a little bit. But, depending on who shows up, not the 21, but who shows up on the public side of it, we do want to give public enough opportunity to participate. We also don't want it to eat up the hour and a half of time. Yes.
So is the policy around developer incentives something that's only enabled via section 2405, that only the Albemarle and Charlottesville have access to currently? So we agree that some of them don't have enabling legislation to enact a policy like this.
I might be wrong. It's my understanding that it's the affordable dwelling unit ordinance that those localities may not enact, but I don't know if that precludes the rest of or specific actions.
So you're spot on. It's
Right.
only certain jurisdictions that does Loudoun, Charlottesville, Albemarle, where I'm trying to encourage Fluvanna County to come in. Fluvanna County is maybe going through its comp plan, and maybe something like this could help formulate their comp plan process on it.
But not in an abstract way.
That's absolutely. So what I'm trying to do is sell the services of the RHP, right, to help other jurisdictions. But Albemarle and Charlottesville is a very laser focused, as you well know, ordinance at the state level that enables them to do this. Frankly, the other jurisdictions, some of the elected officials do not see the value of housing. And this may help them see it differently.
We have participation from supervisors from Louisiana Green, planning commission from Louisiana Green.
They won't be participating in the discussion, but we're hoping to invite them to the event to kind of, just because it's about.
So they'll be in the public side of things. They're not going to be at the table because this is laser focused to help Albemarle County with its developer incentives. The spin-off on it is hopefully to help other jurisdictions with their housing policy.
And not so much that the incentive topic, you know what I mean? So it's when we've made presentations to these other bodies about what we are and how we can help. You know, if they're coming up with their own new housing policy or refreshing it. The RHP is a great place to be a sounding board for what's this policy look like. So it would be very hyper specific to their needs and not necessarily just the topic that Albemarle's introduced. Michael had a certain thing in mind when he mentioned the city. I just can't remember what he had mentioned the topic was. But we'll see. Like I know Jesse's going to be there. I know that Rutherford from Nelson is planning to attend. I know Michael is planning to attend. So I'll be curious to see what they get out of it.
Is there a deadline on the survey submittal?
Beginning of next week.
Do we have a date or a time?
So
Pick a date.
end of the day, Monday.
Pick a date, Smith. Is that what it is?
Yeah, July 3rd, I guess.
Yeah, let's try to get them in, please, by Monday, 5 p.m. Because we're meeting to go through that Thursday.
Yeah, yeah.
And there have been people that are just said they don't either be at a time thing or just don't like to participate and be there publicly talking. But if you have developers or experts or whoever, and they have really good ideas on it, we've been encouraging them through some of the people that we know will participate to write up like a one-pager, a white paper on what they think to get it into the hands of those who will be there so that we can use that as material as well. It's not like there's 1,000 developer incentives out there. So people are, I think, going to hone in on the low-hanging fruit of what could work.
And the reason we split it up between rental and ownership is there may be different incentives for different, you know, for the ownership side of the house might be a little bit different than the rental side of it.
And I guess we still have to do a presentation. We have yet to do a presentation to Fluvanna, which is probably more my calendar. And then Louisa. So we still have every other member of the TJPDC we've made a presentation to.
And these would be essentially new for the county, is that right?
Say that again.
These would be for the new policy essentially.
So Housing Albemarle got put into place. It was 2 years ago last month. And the policy itself got put on hold until incentives could be designed to help the developers meet what the policy states needs to happen. So 15% units to 20, and then the rental side went from 80% AMI down to 60. Now I was supportive of grandfathering and waiting 2 years ago without knowing it was going to take 2 years. So I've definitely been banging the drum of get this done because we won't even take off the bigger bites in Housing Albemarle until this conversation is finished. So I think that going through the RHP will help us get there. And the next big one will be trust fund, housing trust fund.
Is that considered an incentive or is that a separate?
Trust fund, not an incentive. Could be how incentives are. Because a trust fund, depending on how you set it up, it could be. You start to establish, you know, your procedures. Like if you have, okay, how much money will you put in?
Right.
How does it get prioritized going out? Much like an EDA works. Awesome, thank you. The next item, strategic planning implementation. So Ian has a.
We are finally under contract with Amy Neeson Consulting LLC. So it's very exciting. So our contract starts July 1. So I attached kind of the essentially what Virginia Housing asks us to do is to break the work out into different modules. And so if you go through, this is kind of the estimated scheduling of sort of when we anticipate all of this work to be done. We're meeting bi-weekly with Amy and her team, and also she will be attending executive committee and partnership meetings, and we'll figure that out at the executive committee level when we want to have yet another of the strategic planning workshopping type sessions that we had last time. All of that will become clear once we've actually started working with her. But we're really excited. You can see all the costs. We were able to get around $14,500 from Virginia Housing to cover the costs of the consulting. And we're really excited. We hope that this will be, you know, sort of one of the key pieces of the Spark Mill plan that we published last year, where we're thinking about membership composition. I know we've been talking about framework and bylaws, fee structure, and just kind of positioning the partnership. And having someone review through stakeholder engagement, through participation with the partnership, and through staff input, this body of ours. So we're excited to complement the work that's being done internally through the communications and data committees with some outside help. So we're really excited to have Amy on board with us. I can speak for TJPC staff on that one, but I think, yeah, she's gonna be great. She has she's extensive experience with housing organizations across the state. So,
Any questions there?
There is this part that says bylaws framework review. So I know you mentioned that it's mainly focused on membership, but is that something you?
it's something that, yeah. I mean, so we were kind of thinking that because the executive committee has kind of carved that out as like one of their major contributions to this, but having her facilitate perhaps some of those executive committee meetings, like she has expertise in bylaw revision. So we tried to include as much as we could in the scope, because it's hard, these grants are kind of, as you're all well aware, kind of hard to like get. I mean, not hard to get necessarily, but they're hard to get all of what you want in them. So we felt like we would take that opportunity.
Other questions? All right, then we will go to item C, our fiscal year 24 budget. Ian, you gonna walk?
Yeah, this is brief. There's a sheet. So there's two sheets with this. I know we had to wait until the new fiscal year to get every staff's rates finalized to kind of approximate the amount of hours, the approximate total costs for some of the meeting prep, grant writing, and professional development. But you can just take a look briefly at the public sector contributions are the current budget of 50,000. And again, we thank all of our localities for contributing directly to the partnership. Again, you can see that the 14,512, which is all pass through that will be going to Amy, is included in there. And then finally, we've had some conversations with both Virginia Housing and also the Virginia Center for Housing Research based at Virginia Tech about another housing study for the region that would sort of be a 5-year update to the 2019 gaps and needs analysis. The projected budget for that is $120,000 because for every locality, you get $20,000 from Virginia Housing. So that's a pretty substantial amount. We are working to determine how much of that would be kept by the PDC to fund staff time to actually participate and contribute to that market analysis, which is pretty exciting. Essentially, the idea would be that the Virginia Tech staff would be able to train TJPDC staff to do some of the data collection and analysis, which we were all really excited about rather than just contracting it all out. But that is the grant actually hasn't reopened on the Virginia Housing grant directory yet, but we would hope that would start in calendar year 2024, but perhaps within the FY24 fiscal year, if we're able to time it right. So just wanted to put that before you all to let you know that there's another potential big chunk of Virginia housing money that we could acquire, because we're always trying to get as much Virginia housing money as we possibly can. But we're excited about that study and had a really great conversation about some of the potential scope components. And I know as we sent it out to all the localities and actually received feedback from all locality planning and housing staff to forward back to tech. So very excited about that.
Awesome.
So something similar maybe to the last one that we.
Yeah,
HP, right?
it's correct. So it was the 2019 gaps and needs analysis. Yeah. Then there was the regional housing plan, which was done a little bit more by staff and was less. I mean, it definitely was a survey of the housing conditions, but also included recommendations that localities could access for comprehensive planning. But Lord Jane, I know you can talk to this a little bit, but during the consolidated plan for HUD process, we had a lot of stakeholder engagement and kind of realized there are parts of the housing ecosystem, as we're kind of calling it, that weren't included in that 2019 scope. So I don't know if there are specific components you want to highlight.
Yeah. I mean, a number of you guys were consulted,
yeah.
But we talked to 40 different organizations, and yeah, hearing from people more what they're seeing on their ground. It felt like there was more that we could incorporate into our next meeting, doesn't it? So it feels like the one from 5 years ago is a really good baseline and that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Feels like a lot's changed even in this 5 years.
certainly. Yeah, and you know. What with the pandemic, yeah, that was, you know, obviously, yeah. So.
Other questions or comments?
Ian, would you remind me, are we in a July 1 fiscal year?
Yes,
So we're not being asked to approve this budget?
no, so this is all. Well, are we, I think the commission approved the budget.
The commission approves.
Yeah.
And the jurisdictions, this is over and beyond their contribution to TJPDC,
Correct.
so this is their specific contribution to the partnership. The regional housing partnership, but the TJPDC voted on the budget in. It's May, yeah. Right, any other questions?
So, okay, so that means all the TBDs get assigned based on the $50,000 budget. I mean, we have to fit the hours into the 50.
Oh, that's correct. Yes, that's correct. It's so we didn't want to present the figures that we had for the FY23 budget, like the cost per hour. We haven't quite, I mean, Ruth can, I don't know, I'm not intimately associated with the rate setting, but I know that we're still working out all the rates for staff. So we weren't able to provide accurate estimates essentially yet. But at least providing that, knowing that those are the types of activities that the budget's funding.
Our indirect cost rate from our compensation wasn't approved until 4 days ago. And we're still looking at how our fringe rates are calculated, making sure that it's accurate. So it should be ready to say the next week or two. But it wasn't able to go to this.
Well, I've certainly learned at the TJPDC meetings on a monthly basis how there is definite flexibility in how staffing is charged and when and to what, especially with different grants coming online versus not online, and how they can have flexibility to move. And that is part of the monthly update at the TJPDC meetings, so that all of that has to be understood. But good. Other questions or comments there? Moving right along. Okay, we've got some staff updates from the TJPDC. And who, it just says staff. Ian, should I start with you?
Yes, so speaking of strategic plan implementation, I know that I've mentioned we were in the process of recruiting and hiring an AmeriCorps Vista member, and I'm very pleased to announce that we have someone starting with us on August 14th. Her name is Davy Sell. She is a I forgot where she went to undergrad. She's a current Johns Hopkins student getting her master's in data visualization and data analysis. She was actually a mortgage lender for 5 years and is looking to transition into affordable housing advocacy in the nonprofit sector. So we're really excited not only with her area, her expertise, but also I think she's really going to find this project of creating tools, creating housing visualization, both beneficial to her portfolio of work and also for our organization. So we're really excited to have her join us in about a month and a half-ish. So yeah, and then yeah, she will obviously be starting attending partnership meetings and reaching out to you all to meet. Just 2 quick updates on the Virginia Housing PDC Development Grant and then the eviction reduction pilot grant. We're actually, I believe, going to have around 12 homes that the grant funded close over the next 3 or 4 months. So obviously units at Southwood closing in the next, we're going to be visiting them with Virginia Housing, I believe, July 10th or 11th, something like that, to look at some of the attached single family homes that this grant funded, which is really exciting. We're also looking to go out and visit another unit in Fluvanna County at the Houchins Place development as also a Habitat for Humanity project. And then finally in Nelson, out in Arrington, the Piedmont Habitat for Humanity will be finishing one of the I believe it's a modular home that was delivered, and they're currently working to get it all ready to live in. So with all of that, we'll actually have surpassed our 20-unit goal for that grant, which is exciting, but we also hope that over 160 are built. So we're still waiting, obviously, on the Premier Circle and South First Street developments to provide the bulk of the units that were funded by this grant. But we're really excited and obviously glad to be partnering with the Region's Habitat affiliates, and proud to be supporting their work. And then finally, the eviction reduction pilot grant program at Piedmont Housing's Housing Hub. They are fully staffed up, so there's now a full-time landlord engagement person working there, and she actually just completed a mediation course, and so she will start performing mediation services directly at the Albemarle County Courthouse, which is really exciting. Trying to also do the same thing in Charlottesville, but again, very proud to be supporting this really important resource in our community, and yeah, exciting times at the TJPDC housing wing. And then Lori Jean, I know, has some brief updates about the home and HPG programs.
Yeah, so with home and HPG together, we have about 50 homeowner rehabs that have been done in the past year. People who's getting a lot of that done. We had 1 rental unit produced in Greene County, 4 households getting down payment assistance all in the city of Charlottesville. And then with home art starting up, everybody's getting their agreement signed in all of the localities to get that started. And so we're anticipating about 22 rental units getting created throughout our region in the next few years. And then 50 households through BRAC will be receiving case management for folks who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of use. So that's kind of what we're doing on the federal grant side of things.
Great, thank you. Any questions and follow-up to those updates? All right. Thank you. So we are to our roundtable, number 7. And there was a suggested prompt. You don't have to use the prompt, but this is for new members. This is when we go around to get updates and items that you would like to share from your area. And the prompt was, as we go into a new fiscal year with an adopted strategic plan and implementation funding, what do you think is missing from the CVRHP that needs to be addressed in the next fiscal year, and why? So you're welcome to address that question as well. And I'll just move around the room. Dan, you want to kick us off on the roundtable and habitat?
Well, so the question, do you want to?
Either one.
Update from Habitat and also a response to this, or?
I would love a response from both. Yeah, from both areas.
Well, there's a lot going on with Habitat. Our focus in the rural areas, in the rural counties, Blues and Green is a critical home repair that people stay in. And so we treated 20 homes this year. And they're really going to keep that program up. And Albemarle County, our bigger focus is on Colorado. We have currently 49 units under construction. Closing on 30 homes in the first quarter. There are a total of 80, about 100 homes when you account for all the habitat and the great homes going up right now. We're moving pretty fast. Our first village of 80 homes is all done. There are already 20 some odd occupants. But that will be completely done by mid-fall. Which time that will we got other villages. So that's super exciting. Thank you to the county for their support on that, and thank you to the regional housing and PDC for support. In terms of response to this prompt, I think the thing that's top of mind for me is figuring out a way to formally link in the various housing bodies in the different municipalities. So I came straight here from a hack subcommittee, housing advisory committee meeting in the city. And what I don't want to see is all of us doing our work independently. It should be networked and coordinated. And we still have a really hard time, I can speak at that perspective, trying to get Louisa and Green in particular to think about the regional housing challenges as a regional housing challenge. We still see a lot of resistance to people moving across municipal line to affordable housing. not recognizing that the water's flowing in both directions at all times, and it should be for us to have a healthy housing ecosystem. So if there's any way, I don't really know what, if it's talk, then maybe you can tell me what's happening in the county in terms of standing up something that's similar to the housing advisory committee in the county. Is there a more purposeful board specifically about particular housing items, or is there?
In the county now,
Yeah.
there is not a housing advisory committee. That's where in housing Albemarle, the idea around the trust fund and a body that would be created. Not that the two are linked, but that body would be created. And that's conversation's been on hold until the developer incentive piece. That's one of the next conversations we need to have. But right now, we do not have a housing advisory committee in the county.
Ideally, this body could sort of advocate for the creation of similar bodies in the different municipalities of the planning districts, so that the work that it's really the policy, it's detailed work, but it can be seen from a regional perspective rather than a hyper local perspective would be really helpful.
Got it. Good stuff. Any follow-up to that? Questions or anything? Mayor Snook?
So in Charlottesville right now, we've got, I remember seeing a sign on what was it? Welcome to the city of Charlottesville under construction. We've got Friendship Court now to be renamed Kindlewood. We have Crescent Halls, which is reopening in the next course of this week, the next week, the following week, and so on. South First Street construction project is coming along nicely. Both Crescent Hall and South First were supposed to have been formally dedicated and so on a couple weeks ago. That got pushed back for various reasons, so that'll happen probably in August. So lots of construction going on, and for those of us who are more indoor people, we get to argue about zoning rewrite. And that's still hot and heavy discussion, and there's a petition floating around out there that they were happy to tell me last night for 1,480 signatures on it. And aside from the fact that the petition has factual errors contained in it and all kinds of other things in it that are just flat wrong, it's certainly going to be a basis for a lot of argument in the next few months. At this point, the planning commission is hoping that they will get the second draft from the consultants by the end of July, and that they are hoping that they will be done with their portion of it, of reviewing that second draft by September. And that will come to the city, to the city council. It is our great hope that we will get this done before the calendar year. We'll see what that happens. Other than that, nothing going on.
Great. Margaret?
There's nothing happening. The county's working on their policy, and since tomorrow is the first draft of all the chapters, which is momentum. The first time there's been a chapter in there. And so thanks for all of your advocacy there. And it's shaping up, I would say. The county is building on Cal Hill property, which is here. I don't know if anybody knows, but it's downtown Livingston Heights. And I have suggested to them, I don't know if it's been working out, but I've suggested that we do our project there, so you get the people closer to jobs, transportation, services, library, grocery store, etc. versus in Roseland. And like I said, if you've ever been in Nelson, you probably don't know where Roseland is. I'm sure you can get a train. So anyway, that's moving along. I just do rehabs pretty much all the time. I did get a part-time personality organize all that stuff, so we're getting, this year, we have expanded that to crazy heights, and, yeah, that's pretty much all. I have, unless I get.
Anything, any who's or what's that you think are missing from the CBA?
Oh,
I didn't hit Mayor Snook up about that, man.
yeah, I forgot about it, because I was trying to compare to these guys. So, I don't know, I always think that there's like a kind of a job, like bringing this decor person in is just trying to kind of, when you think about. People in the business, you know, how you nurture people coming in, and especially into the nonprofit side of things, you know, into, you know, habitat, and just like making sure that we're kind of nurturing the next generation of people who are looking to be housing advocates or, you know, work in this business. I don't know if there's something that we could do as an organization to kind of feed that, but to me, I feel especially for girls, that it would be helpful.
And Colette?
Well, let's see, I know, I seem to say this at every meeting, that we are like really close to announcing our development partners for the 10th and more than one pavement property. We are really close, but you're like over the finish line yet. You know, big organization and two different organizations between the university and the foundation. We have kind of communication lines and would have to be, you know, eyes dotted, T's crossed. So we're getting there, very close. So I guess just the one thing I think about, and maybe that, you know, I just the budget and the sustainability, the financial sustainability of the organization worries me a lot. I think that we have done amazing work. You know, we've gotten to the place where the localities are, you know, contributing. Ian and his team, I mean, super job in getting grants and everything, but that's, you know, like if we get the grant, we can do this, or if we, so it's really, I think, I always feel like we're operating on that edge. And I don't know how you fix that, but
I think the value proposition that we talk about changes after we do this developer incentives work session, because I think that is a new thing that we've often theorized could occur here, but will finally happen and could take on some extra work for the other localities once they go, oh, wait a minute, we've got a study group, if you would, or whatever you want to call it. So I think after that, you know, since we're involving so many people that are not the jurisdictions in this first one, we're including developers and the nonprofits. We at one point had talked about going to the members and saying that there'd be a contribution from them. I think that opens up the idea that, oh, wait, there's a different value here from them as well, even though we haven't started asking for those funds. I mean, that's just quick response, but I think you're right. I mean, if you're not financially sustainable, then not going to do all that.
But it's also kind of the nature of this work. You kind of live and die by your grants. So it's a double-edged sword a little bit. And love to have a lot more cash in the bank, that's for sure.
And the level of grants coming through the TJPDC as a whole was huge multiplier compared to a couple of years ago.
And we're fully staffed.
That's right. Great, thank you. Mr. Allison.
The EMOC Workforce Development Board started in UC. And I'm the vice chair of that one right now. We feel that it would be more conducive to getting more money aside from just the government, state grants, federal grants, whatever, we can always go through the number of private funding in order to help more people. We don't go commission. I think that's a fantastic thing. We're gonna also give this to for a long time. This is That's good. To answer the question about this year. Well, I was wondering if there was a certain person or group of people who advocate housing for those who have no idea. Meaning, I have lived in Virginia since 1996 when I came over. My last 3 states when I was in New York in 1996. And I just heard about Virginia housing and this, this so I don't know if it's marketing, whatever, or even if it's a working issue or whatever. But if there's a group, I'm glad to be one of the members or one of the employees. Because at one time I was in need of some assistance. It was a hard track, but I don't need it now, of course, but still, it was a time that we didn't have no idea in this assistance without it.
I know that a part of the prior consultant we worked, that was part of the things that they uncovered when they talked to a lot of folks that didn't know about the partnership's existence. And that was part of the driver behind the current one that's looking at, do we have the right people involved? But part of that conversation is always about what's your outreach to let people know you're there.
Yeah. I also think it definitely, one of the things we've been thinking about is trying to capture the full spectrum of housing organizations that people are like associated with. So for example, you have CRHA, Charlottesville Development Housing Authority is right, they obviously build and develop homes for low-income individuals, but through that are obviously intimately connected with those individuals through their relationship with Public Housing Association of Residents, but also by virtue of just being the landlord of that particular set of housing. And so I think that's a great point where, that's one example of an organization that is not currently sitting at this table that might be, well worth having because of their ability to reach out to a specific population of individuals. But that doesn't mean that we're only looking to potentially expand or refine it. I think it's important to talk about the full spectrum of housing, and that's just one example of something that I've heard. But I think that's a good point, and I think that is a challenge that we've certainly struggled with is promoting and marketing ourselves, which is why we have these big events, or trying to plan those. But it's tough for people I think most people aren't aware of the resources that exist in terms of housing, and we're not the only organization, obviously, that provides that, but that's a challenge that we're hoping to be a part of the solution for. But that's a great point.
I get the Justin on that one. We may consider as we're thinking about membership, the Charlottesville Low Income Housing Coalition, which is, I think, probably the most effective group for really reaching broadly in the deeply low income community. It does tend to be sort of a little bit out of the loop on what's available.
Okay.
Well, hopefully we're going to get at that as we continue to work. I mean, it's very specifically for the electeds. That was part of the reason behind us going to do presentations at their bodies. And because you have one member who's probably participating at the partnership, at the other 4 or 5, 6, however many there are, what do they know about it? And that was the idea, like, well, let's get out there and go to them. So the self-advocacy of the folks that's sitting around the table right now, that word of mouth is helpful too, to go out and do that. And Keith and I got invited to do, well, I know with the UVA group that we did a presentation. So if there are other groups out there, we could certainly, between staff and the executive committee, go out and do some of these kind of visits and do presentations about what the RHP is.
I think Green and Nelson have invited us back, so who knew that was even possible?
Yeah. No, Ron?
Pleased to report that Greene County Planning Commission has committed and had accepted our update to the comprehensive plan after a couple of years of working. Ian was a direct contributor to the section on housing and community services. In that particular chapter is all but a couple of paragraphs have to dealing specifically with affordability of housing, accessibility and sustainability of housing, and the goals and objectives section with a lot of supporting data and input is all about the goals and implementation strategies for that chapter. I think unlike in previous revisions to the comp plan are very focused or very directed at unhoused recommendations and affordable rental recommendations and expanding services for seniors and accessible housing for people with special needs, et cetera. So we got a lot of work to do. We've got, I think, some creative information in there. Dan, one of the first goals in here is support habitat for humanity home construction projects. As from the narrative, looks like maybe we've done 3 habitat in green. Yeah.
Oh, more than that. More than that. Over the years, it's double digits. There's one right now with GTech. So we bought a module from GTech.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure title issues with the help of Jim and the staff. It'd be really great. Including the help of them.
So in terms of going into the new fiscal year, is there anything that I can pinpoint that we need that I wouldn't say it's anything we need that we're not already getting. So I think a lot of the legwork that's being done in this housing partnership with regard to data and tools that are in pipeline are right on target. So
Thank you.
that's my input.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Bree?
Yeah, of course, I'm new, so I don't really know much of what would be missing so far, but I know in Flavanna County, we have a huge issue with the affordable housing piece. I stated before I was appointed that I'm only 25. And so unfortunately, because of this pandemic, I still live with my parents. We have a huge issue of young people like me, we're old enough to have, plenty of people I know in high school have kids now and families. They're having to move somewhere else, Richmond or, Northern Virginia to find housing, when some people do want to stay in our area, but we just can't afford it. I personally cannot afford a $750,000 house across the street from my dad's house. Like, that's just way too much. And I think it's good now that we're having, I think it's called Colonial Circle. They're making a few apartments by Lake Monticello, but I'm not sure how affordable they will be. So
125, 60% AMI and below.
okay. So I mean, that's great, but I think we need a lot more housing options and knowing what the programs are, possibilities for us to be a part of, because I just think it's unavailable right now to us. And then also I think about the older people who have lived there 60, 70, 80 years who are on the brink of losing their houses because they just can't afford it. So trying to figure out how to fix that issue.
Thank you. We'll go to the online folks, Keith, and we'll wrap up with, I think, Chair, Vice Chair. Oh, they left. Well, there we go. Back to you, Keith.
They don't want to hear what we have to say.
Greg.
Kind of like Dan, right?
Hopefully Greg is hydrating.
I was gonna give Dan a bunch of kudos and he walked out on me.
You can give him kudos anyway.
I'm gonna give him kudos
Record
anyway.
it in the minutes.
We'll put it in the minutes. Really interesting conversation around the table. And I'm gonna kind of pick it apart a little bit. First and foremost, simplify, Kenny. We have to set our priorities straight. One of the initial concept of the regional housing partnership from day one was always a regional approach. To Dan's comment, what Charlottesville does impacts Flavanna County, what Flavanna does impact Charlottesville, what Albemarle does, so forth and so on. Around that, the partnership was built on these 4 pillars, right? So it was the local governments, having all the local governments here, the nonprofits, the for-profits. And the last one, which we're not really talking a lot about, I think Kenny took it on a little bit, maybe somebody else did, the people who we serve, right? The people who we serve. So back to the core question, we need to grow these, who's participating in within these four pillars. I'm excited about finally moving forward with the consultant, because I think the consultant's going to help us with who's missing and who needs to be here. So I'm excited about that. To Ned's point, I'm just flattered that I've been asked to moderate this thing. And as I said earlier, geez, Lord, hope I don't screw it up, but we're gonna put a little staff sergeant United States Marine Corps into it and see what we can do. Albemarle County just completed its DOD white paper. And I've been pushing a lot of folks to address B's concern in our home county. Some of the rural counties is to, in 2011, Virginia Housing did the effects of housing on the local economy. It was a white paper and included indirect, direct, and induced impacts on the local government. Good, bad, or indifferent. It was a very clear looking at it. I would love this body at some point to kind of tackle that, because part of the problem in our county is we have elected officials that think any housing is bad. You may have the same problem in Greene County. You may have the same problem in Nelson. You may have the same problem in Louisa. And typically, to Lloyd's comment about the bet that I won on it, and I kept my mustache on it, there's an inside story behind this, and the upzoning, as some people call it, I call it zoning rewrite. There's a tremendous devoid of fact. And a white paper is a very linear written thing. You can use the Weldon Cooper Center, somehow or another, we need to do this to create a white paper for our region so that the Board of Supervisors for our county or Greene County can look at that and understand what the impact of housing is on their local economy. Because I don't think they see that. And you guys had a wide eye opening with DOD on how much money DOD is actually bringing into your county, positive or negative. So that's going to be my new soapbox. So watch out, and coming up around on it once I get removed from this developer incentive thing. But I think we need to, as a body, is to help the other bodies understand the impacts of housing on their economy. My mother and father, Havana County.
Can you do it so that you do it kind of like the 2019 study that was done, so that each county has a paragraph? And then
I'm just smart enough to figure out that we need to do that. How? I'm not smart enough to go do that. But yeah, I mean, just Google. This is a 2011 thing. It's very well written. It just breaks down what the induced, what the direct, so forth and so on across the board. But to your point, my father's a retired New York City fireman. He's on a pension. And we're blessed because they can come live with us, but they can't afford to pay the taxes anymore. They can't afford to pay whatever it is in Havana County. I've been there since 80. I got out of Corps in 86. They've been there since 87. So it's a bit of a soapbox for me, but I would love this body to be the neutral body to provide facts to everybody. There you go. I'm done with my soapbox, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that's what the round table is about, right? I'm excited that the developer incentive conversation is happening next month. The idea and the schedule behind it was that depending on how that session goes, if there's a round 2 that's needed, there's time for that. And if there is or there isn't, this kind of finds its way to the board and our planning commission for a joint session in September, and then runs the gambit to close the conversation on developer incentives by the end of the year, which would be really nice. But other than that, I don't, unless there's specific questions about Albemarle, that's just in terms of housing, that is the only conversation right now, because it's holding everything else up, in my opinion. In regard to who or what is missing, I'll be curious when the strategic plan or the consultants come back, because I wonder how you incorporate the fourth pillar, the people you serve, into a formalized regular meeting structure. Like we have in Albemarle, we have citizen advisory committees, which is all citizen made. I'm a liaison to it. So I'm not really a member of it. I just go there to report and answer questions, but it's all citizens. And it's very specific. And there's, 15, 20 people that I get to hear from every month on a localized area. So how do we find, as opposed to just figuring out that one city rep or that one rural rep, like how do you really incorporate them into it? Because I think that voice is what is probably missing. And I'm hoping the consultants will help us figure the answer out to that. So I'll leave it at that for that prompt. Ruth or Ian, anything to add from TJPDC other than the updates?
No, thanks everyone for coming today.
Nobody. I went down mine already once, didn't I? All right, then we will move to an adjournment, which is the next meeting is September 287. What the? So that would be
28th.
the 28th.
Yeah.
I was gonna quickly, I was like, what? 27th is a Wednesday. So the next meeting will be September 27, 2023, 2 to 3:30. And with that, if there's no objection, we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.